access tunnels and stuff, but being underground, like in a sewer or a catacomb or a dungeon or a surprise second basement that leads to a whirlpool of death, part of what's making that creepy is, you know, oh, it's dark, it's in the undercity. But if you have an entire city that's all subterranean and lit by like candles and bioluminescent algae and so forth, you're not gonna have as much of that inherent fear of like, oh, we're going into the creepy basement, the basement of the city, which is creepy. So what do you do then? You just make it like in the sub-basement? In the basement to your basement? And I was like, no. If we had a creepy house, you also have the option of like the creepy attic. So, in the way this city is set up, let's say that like if you're in like the upper levels, really close to the surface, like there's people who go to the surface regularly, like if you gotta tend your bees, you gotta graze your goats, you gotta harvest your oats. I looked into like what can grow in, what can survive in mountains, like what's gonna be their like main pack animal. It's like, it's gonna be goats, because like they're cute, they're hardy, they can do mountains, you can get, depending on the particular kind of goat, you can get wool from some goats. You could spin their fur into yarn and you know, because there's like these pygmy Angora goats. Goats that have, you know, you've got your goat cheese and goat milk and so forth. And of course, eventually mutton. And like, what's their grain? Well, like they mostly, like their main subsistence grain is oats, because again, oats you can do in mountainous regions, and also because that way I can have goats, oats, and honey is the, like, that's the local food. You know, because beekeeping also useful and gives people something, you know, there's something else that you can do, you know, in a mountainous region. Like you don't need to be somewhere tropical to keep bees. Bees are kind of, you know, they can kind of do wherever, especially if this is somewhere that's like established and they have like beekeepers. You can do, you know, people keep bees in places in like the continental United States that get proper winters, and they have ways of like winterizing that. And we've done, you know, people do that in Europe for ages, so like that's fine, that's great. So first off, this means the dwarves get mead, and actually they get tej, in my opinion. Like I just decided, all right, they get like that, like sort of a honey wine. And then I was thinking about probably supplementary grain to the oats would be either like amaranth or rye. So they're gonna have a lot of like very cakey, dense breads. But in making the connection between mead and tej, I was like, what if they have something similar to injera? Because I already was saying, oh, they make like if you want to have like a birthday, you wouldn't have like a cake, like a leavened cake. You would have like a oat flour crepe cake, where you would have like a series of crepes with alternating layers of like a cream. Like you would have like a whipped cream sweetened with honey, with layered, like a crepe, and a layer of honeyed cream, and a crepe and a layer of honeyed cream. And maybe you would add, depending on the time of year, you might add some either fresh berries or a berry compote. You might add some mint leaves, whatever the person whose birthday it is into. You could add, you know, might have like a lot of spices because you're having like a lot of trade coming through your classic subterranean dwarven city. And I was thinking, well, I already established this crepe thing, and I've already established like these weird, like they have some like unusual grains, so maybe they have sort of a, you know, magical grain, like, you know, it's, you know, there's fucking dragons and shit. They have a grain that is somewhere between, you know, it kind of like rye, but also kind of like like we can give it a treatment similar to teff in Ethiopian cuisine, and they can make not just like sweet crepes, but also savory sourdough crepes. Basically, they would make injera, which you find a lot in Ethiopian and Eritrean food, because the idea of this like sort of spongy, big sourdough thing, and you know, it's a plate, it's a utensil, that struck me as like really, again, you have like when you're doing dwarves in fantasy, you don't want to go too far in any one real world culture. You definitely don't want to be like, they're the bankers. Like it's you want to like sidestep those particular potholes, so sort of like stealing liberally from multiple real world cultures and lean more into the positive things of like, oh, these are, you know, master craftsmen, and if you have a culture and sort of establishing like there's a lot of like mutual aid going on, because like you like as a society, like you're not going to do as well if people are trying to like work on an empty stomach, but also sort of a sort of pragmatism to food that and thinking through that like this is probably going to be a culture that's going to have a lot of food that's going to be like as weird by, you know, your bog standard humans, but going to be specific to them, and the way that a lot of like real world othering as regards food comes down to like unusual spices, but also unusual preparation, and the idea of like you eat first with your eyes, and that you're going to have different expectations in a culture that's more like collective and pragmatism focused than someone coming from like a more like hyper capitalist, you know, fancy human city. Just that way we're establishing like, all right, we have goat milk, we have oats, we have you know, all your you know, subterranean food categories. You've got your root vegetables, you've got your mushrooms, you've got you know, certainly probably local wildflowers that you could use as herbs and poultices, but also for flavoring, for making tisanes. I don't think you have coffee. I think you would have some sort of a like chicory black tea, like the way you do like cold brew concentrate, that they would make like some sort of a concentrated, like bitter herbal thing, and that serves the function of coffee. But I don't think you have coffee, even though we've established that coffee exists in this universe. It's just not popular, because it's, you know, why would you do this thing that you need to import, drink this thing that you need to import, when you can drink this other thing that you can like just grow, you know, have a little your own little patch of mushroom and the herb that is equivalent to Lapsang Shushan here, and have that going on. And so this is just sort of, it's a bit of a ramble. I actually wrote this all down in a document at some point, which was itself stream of consciousness, but just thinking about like these little aspects of like, all right, what can survive in a mountain, what's going to be pragmatic, also the upside of having like your savory, you know, have it be more of a sturdy, like more injera than crepe, that, you know, maybe you're making your food and you're wrapping it in a way that you're taking it with you for later, and like the fact that you may be using a container, like you have your injera like sourdough rye and oat like bread, this very, very tangy flatbread, and then you have like whatever your meal for lunch is, your leftover mushroom stew, your bits of roasted parsnip and carrot, your quick pickles. I think there's like, and there's a lot of like really strong flavors. Like everything is kind of various shades of